Episode 4 of The Acolyte has arrived, and with it comes a welcome return to the show's main timeline.
You need to kill the Wookiee. You made a deal.
And now it's time to break it down. This episode is packed with twists and turns that genuinely surprised me, and they've completely blew the direction the show seemed to be heading in out of the water.
Not after I tell them who I know.
But some of the big theories still remain. So grab your Sith helmets and get ready, because we've got a ton to discuss. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button. If you'd like to catch more of our Star Wars videos, then feel free to subscribe. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get into The Acolyte Episode 4. Okay, so we pick up almost where we left off in episode 2. Qimir learns the whereabouts of the Wookiee Jedi Kelnacca, which is in the luxury forest retreat on a planet called Kofar. There, Kelnacca's living out a solitary life away from the Jedi and the Republic. Now, we do learn that he turned off his transponder around a year ago, and since then he hasn't likely had any contact with anyone within the Order. He's living on his ship, which has definitely seen better days, but interestingly, he's drawn the symbols of the Witches of Brendok on his wall. Now, this could mean a multitude of different things. However, I think the witch symbols are most likely there to show us that the events of Brendok have had a deep lasting impact on Kelnacca, likely in a similar fashion to how they did for Torbin, and this has led Kelnacca to effectively cutting himself off. So they're really there to show us that not all's well with the Wookiee and that his past is still haunting him. Now, back on Coruscant, it's almost leaving time for Osha. With the help of Sol and the other Jedi, her name's pretty much being cleared at this point, and she can't really bring herself to be a part of the mission to capture May, so she really serves no further purpose being there. May's very much the Jedi's problem now, or so Osha thinks. She watches as the other Padawans, including Jeki, train under Master Lakshay, and I can't help but feel like she's wondering what her life would have been like if she did end up sticking it out with the Jedi. After saying her goodbyes to Jeki, she's leaving without saying goodbye to Master Sol, feeling she's caused him enough trouble already. Now, without dwelling on the past for too long, we cut back to Kofar, where May and Qimir finally arrive. Now, what's interesting is that we see both of them have a clothing pod each, but there's also a third clothing pod too. Now, I'm of the belief here that Qimir is actually the Master Red lightsaber wielding villain, who does also feature in this episode, by the way, if you haven't seen it. But seeing 3 clothing pods here when there should really only be 2 makes me wonder if the helmet and the Sith gear are actually stashed away inside. Either that, or one of them just wants to enjoy the forest retreat for a while after they've dealt with the Wookiee. Now, Qimir tells May that he's risking his life to help her, not for the Master. There's also mention of a deal in place between May and the Master as well. Now, if I were to guess, I'd say that the Master's agreed to train May as an acolyte, providing her with the skill set that she needs to take down and kill Jedi. However, that also comes with the understanding that she has to do so without the use of a weapon. Now, interestingly, this episode hints at the possibility that May actually knows the Master through Qimir, not the other way around. That he was potentially Qimir's master before May's. Although May clearly has limited knowledge of the true situation at hand here, that's her viewpoint of it all, for now at least. Now, the Jedi are holding a small meeting to discuss the reveal that Osha's long-lost, presumed dead twin sister, May Anastasia, is the one going around killing Jedi rather than Osha herself. Now, this presents a vastly different situation to the Jedi than if it was just Osha responsible, as May's an outsider with training, which means whoever her master is has knowledge of the dark side of the Force and isn't a fan of the Jedi themselves, whereas before, if it was Osha, they knew where she got all her training from. Now, as the Jedi discuss what steps to take in dealing with May, we see the Jedi present in the meeting are Holden, Lakshay, and a face you'll be familiar with, Ki-Adi-Mundi. Now, he's the very Jedi that told the rest of the Council in The Phantom Menace that the Sith have been extinct for more than a millennia. Now, this ultimately means either the Jedi never get to the bottom of who May's master really is, or Ki-Adi-Mundi is involved in probably the biggest cover-up in the history of the Jedi Order. Now, at this point, I think both scenarios hold the potential to be true, as we've already seen the Jedi's reluctance to pass information on in fear of the reaction from other council members or even the wider Republic. The Jedi note here that May has incredible fighting skills, and Vanesta's mind instantly goes to a Jedi teacher, possibly a splinter order, which is effectively a rogue Jedi that's turned to the dark side. This further shows their ignorance to other powerful Force users being out there in the galaxy at this time, such as the Sith. Benesta's reluctant to tell the High Council about May, and instead wants to send Holden to get Kelnacca and take May out. However, with Sol's attachment to Osha and the fact he couldn't save May before, but hopes to now getting the better of him, he volunteers to go himself, taking Osha along too. Now we see the Jedi here thinking out the situation a few steps ahead, as they understand by outright arresting May, whoever her master likely is, would then retreat back into the shadows and possibly be lost to the Jedi forever. That's why they decide to take Osha along, as she's the one who could potentially lead May to handing herself in. Rao tells Sol she feels May's only a small part of a grander plan to ultimately tip the scales into darkness, which, as we know, is exactly what's happening. Now, one thing this episode does really well is it paves out Qimir and May's differing relationships with the enigmatic master. As mentioned earlier, it seems Qimir introduced May to the Master himself. However, we learn that unlike May, Qimir hasn't made some kind of deal with him. Rather, the Master's just collected him and is creating a network of beings he deems useful to his cause. You know, I really do think Qimir is the Master himself here, and this is all just part of his disguise. With the Sith keeping their existence and identities tightly under wraps, I think Qimir is doing all of this in case May was ever to be compromised. He seems to be adding fuel to the fire at almost every given opportunity. He's always reminding May of her mission, and although he seems to care for her, he also knows which buttons to push and when. As seen when May shows a level of compassion for her sister, however she's ultimately disgusted that she's become a Jedi, that's when Qimir subtly drops in which Jedi she seems most attached to, almost pointing her in the direction of what Jedi needs to be killed to free her sister from their grasp. Now, as Osha is about to board the transport and leave Coruscant, Sol finds her and convinces her to come along on the mission with him, telling Osha that there's still light within May when it comes to her sister, and that her eyes softened when she learned Osha was alive. Osha asks if she'll be on the mission as a Jedi, and while Sol doesn't dismiss the possibility of her coming back entirely, you know, I'm sure he'd love to have her back, she's still going to be going on this mission as a civilian, which means she's also got to wear the civilian robe. Now, I have to say, I found that pretty funny. I often find Star Wars works best when it's not trying to be funny, as when it does, it can often be too on the nose and feel a little bit forced, which mostly happened in the sequels, if I'm being honest. But here, I think they actually hit the sweet spot with the humour. And I also think the more time Osha spends around a Jedi, the more she wants to come back on board. Anyway, in order for the Jedi to find Kelnacca in the forest, they need a tracker, and as Kelnacca turned off communication a year ago, they're using an alien called Basil. Now, Basil's actually another character that's come over to canon from Legends, pretty much fulfilling the role of a sniffer dog. Basil smells an old rag, which probably belonged to Kelnacca at one point, and then sets about picking up his scent in the forest. Now, on the way to find Kelnacca, it becomes even more evident. The twins' feelings for one another, despite all them years of separation and being on completely different paths, is still strong. And like we've already seen with Osha leaving the Jedi Order as she wasn't able to shake the past, we'll also see it's these very feelings that seem to be leading May down a similar path with the Sith. Now, Osha tells Yord that if things go south, he needs to step up for her and take out May, but Yord tells her she needs to face May, but also herself and her past. May's been the one wound Osha's had over the years that's never quite healed. Now, it wouldn't quite be Star Wars, would it, without the strange-looking monster creatures. The Bad Batch is well known for it, but in truth, it's always been a big part of Star Wars, from A New Hope when we had the Wampa to the Mandalorian, with creatures such as the Krayt Dragon, just to name a few. This time around though, it's the moth-like creatures called Umbra Moth. They stick to trees, and upon walking past, Osha detects its presence, which is actually a sign of her Force abilities slowly coming back to her after years of not using them. However, the moth also senses her and decides to attack. Luckily though, it turns out that just like moths on Earth, these are also attracted to light too, with them being drawn towards Sol's lightsaber where he slices it in half. I mean, it kind of makes sense in a way, doesn't it? Now, I'm not too big on the story being slowed down for a battle with strange creatures in general, so I kind of liked how quickly this was resolved. So May and Qimir take a short break from tracking down Kelnacca. Qimir seems to have stamina for days, whereas May's pretty knackered at this point in time, and if she's about to take on a Wookiee Jedi, she wants a bit of rest beforehand. We learn that killing a Jedi without a weapon is what the Master calls May's final lesson. Now, essentially, through May, we're seeing a version of the Sith's training as opposed to the Jedi's for a change. Now, May thinks this is near on impossible, but if she doesn't do it, the Master's going to kill her. Of course, Qimir is here telling her that it is possible. Now, I actually agree with May here. I don't think it's possible for her to kill a Jedi without a weapon just by using the Force and cunning alone, and I actually think she's misunderstood the real meaning behind her final lesson as well. I think the Master wants her to kill the idea of the Jedi rather than killing them physically. The Master wants her to manipulate the perception of a Jedi those around them. So for example, how she could kill Kelnacca without a weapon would be for her to lead the rest of the Jedi Order into believing he's actually not a good Jedi after all, perhaps due to his actions on Brendok for example, with the Jedi in turn then removing him from the Order and perhaps even worse, imprisoning him. As the Master said in episode 1, an acolyte kills the dream, as in kills the dream of the Jedi. Accepting to take a break, Qimir goes on ahead to look for water. Now I don't think this is really what he's doing, but May's got other ideas anyway. She lets out a series of screams to lure him back, only for him to be caught up in a quick trap that she's made up. She tells Qimir Osha being alive changes absolutely everything, and that her loyalty now lies with her sister and not his master. Now this is a huge twist, I really didn't see this coming. Anyway, she plans on surrendering to Kelnacca and telling the Jedi everything she knows in regards to her master, Qimir, and the Sith, if she actually knows they're Sith, that is. Now, just as we thought we could trust Sol as well, this is an episode full of surprises and twists, and that if the Jedi did actually do something wrong on Brendok all them years ago, then Sol likely didn't know about it. We get hit with a bombshell that Sol hasn't been entirely truthful thus far, with him telling Osha that once they manage to get May on the ship, he'll explain everything to them, implying that there's another side of the story yet to be told. So May, making a mad dash away from Qimir being trapped, locates Kelnacca's ship, coming across Basil in the process, who then sends out a call to the rest of the Jedi that he's found her. But once inside the ship, we're hit with another big bombshell that Kelnacca's already dead by lightsaber wound as well. Now, May comes to the daunting realization here that her master's there too. With Kelnacca's wounds still smouldering, the attack likely only just happened. Now, it's totally possible that Qimir did go looking for water, but then again, it's totally possible that he actually went on ahead and dealt with Kelnacca himself, trying to push May along when she needed it the most, when he sensed the darkness was dwindling within her, which would only leave her one Jedi left to kill without a weapon, and that would be Sol. And if it is indeed supposed to mean killing a dream of Sol rather than actually killing him physically, then the implications of that could result in Osha falling to the dark side too. Then the Sith would then have two acolytes in their service until only the strongest one remains. So the Jedi arrive before too long to Basil's calls and tell May to come out. However, as the Jedi told Osha to stay behind them, as she is after all the civilian on the mission, a dark figure descends down behind her, and this moment really gives you classic horror movie vibes, which I think fits the Sith really well. It turns out to be the masked villain we've all been waiting for, May's master. Jackie and the other Jedi have no idea what it is, but then it ignites its red lightsaber. The Jedi ignite theirs and Sol shouts at Osha to run. The Sith then throws May to the side with no effort at all, and he also pushes the other Jedi back effortlessly using the Force. So whoever this Sith turns out to be, Qimir or someone else, they're clearly extremely powerful, and going by what we've seen of them so far, that'll be more of a match for most of, if not all of the Jedi present in that forest. So next week looks set to be a banger of an episode where I'll expect we'll see just how ignorant the Jedi are to the continued survival of the Sith. I also think we'll find out who's under the mask next week too, so before we get to that point, drop your thoughts, theories, and wilder speculations on who you think the masked menace is down in the comments below. Please give the video a thumbs up if you enjoy it, and of course subscribe to the channel if you want to catch more of our Acolyte and our other Star Wars videos too. Thanks for clicking and watching to this point. I'll catch you in the next one. Force will be with you always.